to be on the ballot for the midterm election in November. The primary is 1 week from today. Let's meet the candidates. Up first, Andrew Giuliani. Lee Zeldin. Astorino. On stage, an order of closing remarks was determined by a random drawing held prior to tonight's events. Each candidate will be given equal time and an equal amount of questions about key issues facing voters today. Not all candidates will answer every question. The order of questions were determined by Newsmax. Answers will be limited to 1 minute or less, and we have a countdown clock to keep the candidates to time. 30-second rebuttals will be allowed if one candidate attacks another. This will be at the moderator's discretion. All candidates have agreed to the rules. And now we ask our very enthusiastic audience to be respectful and limit applause to the end of the debate. For background purposes, both Andrew Giuliani and Rob Astorino have served as paid contributors to Newsmax in the past. However, neither have any formal or informal role currently at Newsmax. All right, well, let's get started, folks. If you're ready, here we go. This is for all of you, all candidates. If New York were a separate country, by the way, some estimates would have it the 11th largest economy in the world with 20 million people and home to the nation's largest city. What makes each one of you qualified to lead such a complex and consequential state? You each have 30 seconds. Mr. Astorino, you will be first.
Well, Eric, thank you, and good to be with everybody here in Rochester. I'm qualified because I did it. In Westchester County, which is 3-to-1 Democrat, home of the Clintons and George Soros, this staunch conservative got elected twice, cut taxes, held the line on the budget for $1.8 billion, all straight 8 years. I also made sure that when the Democrats went crazy and they controlled the county board, I vetoed their legislation for spending or whatever chaos they tried to put on Westchester. So I'm the only one here on this stage with executive experience.
All right, these guys are also Mr. Giuliani, you're up next.
Well, first off, thank you very much, Eric, Newsmax, for putting this debate on, and I'd like to thank you. It is nice to be with you in person finally. To serve the last 4 years of my time in the Trump White House, working on important issues like the Paycheck Protection Program. Eric, like you know very well, like the Opioid Task Force, and like making sure that 9/11's health fund got refunded the money that had been taken out of over the previous administrations. When I think about the work that I did with President Trump in the White House, that's the kind of change that we need in Albany, and I would bring that experience to Albany to change Albany.
All right, let's go. Next up is Congressman Lee Zeldin.
Life experience. I'm currently in my 20th year serving the United States Army. The life experience of raising identical girls born 14.5 weeks early, weighing just a pound and a half. Serving the last 4 terms in the United States Congress. It's important to respect life, respect freedom, allow people to keep more of their money. Individual liberty. We see it with medical freedom. We see it with regards to preserving the Second Amendment. It is important to have a strong, principled structure and backbone, which is lacking, unfortunately, with a government. Thinks that they want to rule the people. No, the people want to be in charge of their own government.
Okay, Mr. Wilson.
I'm a businessman, not a politician. I've spent nearly 30 years, the highest levels of American business, fixing broken companies. I think that is exactly the skill set we need to fix the most broken state government in the country. In my turnaround plan, we will cut income taxes 20%. We will cut property taxes 20%. We will engage in regulatory reform to reduce the cost of living for families across the state. I'm the only person who's created jobs and built a business. That's exactly what we'll do in a focus on economic development. I am from upstate New York. I understand the challenges of the upstate economy, and that experience of both business and having lived it through my entire life is exactly what we'll do to revive the state.
Okay. All right, here we go. Candidates, the #1 issue concerning all Americans today, inflation. The annual inflation rate is 8.6%. Rising gas prices cause all of the costs, such as food, to rise. New York also has high taxes. high housing costs, and unfriendly business regulations that increase prices at a greater rate than other states. What would each of you do as governor to help New Yorkers battle inflation? And Mr. Wilson, you're first.
Sure, so it is a huge issue, and we've forgotten all the lessons of the last 40 years because of the bad Biden policies that have enabled this 40-year record inflation. So what we can do at the state level is offset it by reducing taxes and the cost of living. So when you go through all of my pieces, property tax cut, income tax cut, cost of living, those will put up to $5,000 a year into the pockets of middle-class families. It is a total game changer, and that is how we offset bad Biden policies here in New York, making New York much more affordable.
Okay, Mr. Astorino?
Well, I did this. In Westchester, as I mentioned, we held the line on spending, which meant we had to cut hundreds of millions of dollars out of the budget to stay at $1.8 billion for all 8 years. And that allowed us to cut property taxes. We worked with all of our businesses, big and small, so they could prosper in Westchester County. And that's something we have to do here in New York. And unfortunately, we go back to the Cuomo years and the Hochul years now. This train has been out of control for so long. And unfortunately, it was people in the state Senate, in New York, in Albany, like Lee Zeldin, who were voting for the Cuomo budgets the entire time that got us to this point. Unfortunately, that train was put on that track, and it was kept by the conductor, Lee Zeldin, and Andrew Cuomo. And that's why we are today where we are. $40 billion additional in the last 2 years in our budgets in New York. And that means we have the highest taxes. I will cut taxes, including the estate tax for our farmers and small businesses, corporate taxes, income taxes, and yes, I already did it. I cut property taxes in Westchester, and we'll do that in New York.
All right, Congressman Zeldin.
We have to bring down spending. We have to cut taxes across the board. One of the ways that we can help revitalize local economies, to create jobs, to generate revenue, we should reverse the state's ban on the safe extraction of natural gas. It's important for the southern tier, it's important for other counties that want it. We have pipeline applications right now in Albany that are collecting dust, being delayed, denied, that instead should be getting approved. Right now we have one-party rule. Kathy Hochul is going to get fired November 8th. I'm looking forward to removing on new construction statewide. I care about the future of the state. I am all in on this rescue mission to save our state. Unfortunately, what you just heard was untrue from Mr. Astorino. One, I never once voted for Cuomo's proposed budget. And secondly, when Mr. Astorino was the county executive, he got run out. Because the deficit and debt went up, the cash reserves plummeted, the bond rating went down, and the sewer fund ended up owing tens of billions of dollars to the general fund. He forgot to mention all that. He's actually lost 3 consecutive races for 3 different offices, and he's trying to get your vote once
So
again.
before I go to Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Astorino, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I think I do. To say that we didn't vote for the Cuomo budgets
It's true.
It's incomprehensible.
But it's true.
Look it up, folks, because the executive, which I was, has to give the budget, and then the legislature votes on that budget, which he did. So every year we voted aye when Cuomo said, this is what you're going to do. The problem that we've been facing in New York is we've had the establishment, the status quo, the get-along, go-along crowd, like Lee Zeldin in Albany when he was in the state Senate majority, but at the time he was a reliable vote for Andrew Cuomo.
Actually,
that's not really New York.
Next time we get further into this, guys.
15 seconds.
15 seconds to leave.
Okay, so when they tried that last week, these guys ended up getting fact-checked by Politico. They did the research, and Politico found that
Okay, let's talk about the issues that are important to New Yorkers, like the fact that you mentioned inflation through the roof.
Look, I have a baby girl, my baby Grace, 6 months old, and I am concerned with the baby formula shortage. When I think about New York state budget at $220 billion, and I compare Florida state budget as $98 billion, it's no reason why we leave the country in out-migration. We need to make sure that we work on day one to take the same type of regulatory action in the state of New York that President Donald Trump took in the United States of America. Well, that's what we're going to do in New York. By the way, when he walked out of the White House, that number was over 8-1, and that's why we saw record unemployment. That's what we're going to do in New York. We're going to absolutely make sure we tap into the Marcellus Shale and make sure we can actually make New York the best taxes for New Yorkers over the age of 65, making $100,000 or less. We need to make sure that we reignite the flame that is New York.
Rising crime is a concern for many Americans. Local and state governments have passed laws to limit incarceration and diminish the ability of police to keep our streets safe. And this has led to a rise in crime. Cashless bail was passed by the Senate and Assembly of the state legislature. What would you do, each of you do, to lower crime, knowing that the repeal of cashless bail and other measures would be difficult to get passed in the legislature? And we'll start with you, Mr. Giuliani.
Well, first and foremost, on day one, I go right to Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Carl Hastie and tell them very simply, full repeal of bail reform on my desk, or I'm not funding anything in our upcoming budget. End the war on cops, not just in this state, but in this country, to be perfectly honest. We are in Rochester right now, where last year they had the most murders ever in recorded history. And they now have a police oversight board in the state that is already filled with corruption. Unfortunately, we've been sending the wrong message to police. They will know, as your governor, there is nobody that will back the police to the degree that I will. On day one, we will work to make sure that we fire rogue district attorneys like Alvin Bragg, like any other Soros-funded district attorney across the state. $5 billion state pot, so that way any city, any municipality, any county that has had their resources taken or defunded can tap right into the state budget, so that way we end the war on our police.
It's the constitutional authority of the governor. It needs to get done the first day as soon as we get sworn in office. We need to repeal cashless bail. We need to reverse the discovery law changes. We need to get rid of less is more, which is releasing people early from prison. We have to get rid of the HALT Act. We should pass a law enforcement Bill of Rights, recognize their inherent right of self-defense. Make sure they have all the tools and resources they need to do their jobs safely and effectively. Make sure they're not unfairly targeted by investigations. We should overhaul the parole board. We should change it from a majority vote to a unanimous vote. We should allow victims to be able to provide testimony. We shouldn't be releasing cop killers and murderers from the parole board as easily as what we are seeing right now. On my website, zeldinfornewyork.com/secureourstreets, we outline our top couple dozen or so proposals in order to secure our streets. I was raised in a law enforcement household, and I'm honored to have the endorsement of a whole host of different law enforcement organizations across this state, and I look forward to once again having Albany unapologetically back in the blue.
Lessons of the Giuliani era, the Bloomberg era, and other cities across the state who made massive improvements in crime. It is unacceptable for New Yorkers to live on unsafe streets. It's deeply personal for me. I have two cousins in law enforcement, and just 10 days ago, as I shared on the debate stage a couple debates ago, I had an extended family member killed by someone out on cashless bail. We need to think about victims, not criminals. That is a critical Making New York Safe crime plan on our website that goes through everything from repealing bail reform to fixing discovery standards and supporting our great men and women in law enforcement who need the financial and human support that they need to do the job they do well. But when it all comes down to, you ask about how do you get it done? All of these bad policies were created by the Cuomo local budgets. We will undo them to the Cuomo local budgets, and we will not back down because it is that essential to get it done for the people of the state.
Okay. Mr. Astorino?
And this, unfortunately, is across New York State and around the country because we are coddling criminals right now. The leftist agenda has handcuffed our police officers, defamed and defunded them, and unfortunately, they're letting the criminals run wild. I'm a gun owner, and I'm proudly a Second Amendment supporter. And it's interesting, if I have a concealed carry permit, which I do, and I take my gun by accident from, let's say, the Westchester border into the Bronx, I would be a felon overnight if caught. And yet, all these criminals who are arrested with illegal possession of a gun, those charges are dropped. They're released. No cash bail obviously is a big mistake and needs to be repealed, and it will be. I will fire district attorneys like Alvin Bragg who ignore the law. They have to go. We saw that in San Francisco. Watch it happen in New York. I will remove him. But also things like stop, question, and frisk, which is constitutional. Things like that work, like taking guns from criminals in those gun-free zones that don't work, We have to go after criminals, and I will, and stop this chaos in New York.
All right, this is